Have you ever wondered why your life seems to follow a script that wasn't written by you? Even though you follow advice, work hard, study, and fulfill your obligations, something inside you remains restless, as if an essential piece is missing. Have you ever kept quiet to avoid arguments, agreed with ideas you didn't believe in just to avoid seeming ungrateful, or acted contrary to your own desires to avoid disappointing someone? Maybe you've even found yourself playing a role, talking in a way that isn't you, wearing what others expect of you, smiling when you wanted to scream, and yet you still feel empty. It's as if you're living inside a bubble shaped by other people's expectations. We grow up surrounded by voices telling us what is right, what is wrong, who we should be. These voices disguise themselves as common sense, responsibility, morality, but often what they carry is just fear. Fear of being rejected, of not being loved, of not fitting in. And this fear silently teaches us to betray ourselves. Nietzsche said that most people prefer security to freedom, and society offers exactly that, a place in the herd. In the herd, you don't have to think, just follow. It promises stability, direction, belonging. But what they almost never say is that this comfort comes at a cost, and the cost is yourself. Little by little, your voice weakens, your desires fade, your identity dilutes. And when you realize it, you're living a life you don't recognize as your own. The herd teaches you to conform, to be predictable, to never question. It discourages dreams and distrusts those who dare to seek something more. That is why many people spend their lives trying to fit in, accepting the minimum, suffocated inside. How many times have you swallowed your words, abandoned your plans, distanced yourself from what you love, all to avoid causing trouble? How many times have you felt guilty for simply wanting something different? You may not even realize it, but many of your fears were not born within you. They were inherited. Fears passed down through generations as if they were part of your flesh. And that is exactly how the herd operates, with guilt and fear. It tames through affection, controls through approval, represses through the promise of acceptance. The question is, how long will you continue to live like this? How long will you stifle your essence to fit into a world that is not yours? There's a cost to leaving the herd, but living trapped in it costs much more. Freedom is a lonely path. When you start to question the unspoken rules, the herd reacts. You become the stranger, the ungrateful one, the rebel. The pain is real. It is a deep emptiness. You feel like you're betraying something greater, your family, your community, your culture. It is the weight of being rejected by the good, the righteous, those who follow the script without question. The judgmental gaze hurts more than any words. You realize that many were only on your side because you agreed, said amen, were part of the bubble. When you leave the bubble, the silence screams. It is the silence of exclusion, the silence of those who cannot handle your freedom. Nietzsche knew that the loneliness of the free thinker is inevitable. This feeling of not belonging is the initial price of freedom. It's not easy to break free from a system that shapes, from childhood, the idea that the right thing to do is to follow what others do. The first break hurts, but that pain is a sign that something inside you is being born. You are finally beginning to live. Freedom is not a flower garden, it is a desert. When you choose authenticity, what awaits you is not a party, applause, or acceptance. It is loneliness. Even surrounded by people, you feel empty. Conversations seem superficial, topics meaningless. Many live like ghosts, present in body, but absent in thought. The worst part is that they don't even realize it. You try to share your ideas, but you encounter barriers. Little by little, you speak less, not because you have nothing to say, but because you understand that few want to listen. Nietzsche saw this loneliness as part of the process. He knew that the price of freedom is high. You lose comfort, approval, applause. But in this desert, something is born. Clarity. Loneliness forces you to look inward, to confront truths, fears, desires. It is a necessary and transformative process of reconstruction, because only when you stop seeking external validation do you discover who you really are. Loneliness is not a punishment, it is a calling. It is a time to find yourself, to understand yourself, to heal yourself. When everything seems too heavy, remember, it is during this journey that your strength is being forged. The desert is not the end, it is the path. At first, you try to explain, you argue, justify your choices. Try to prove that you haven't gone crazy, that you're not being irresponsible, that your decision to be free is not a whim, but a legitimate search for meaning. But over time, you realize that it's no use. People only hear what they are ready to hear, and most are not. They want to preserve their certainties. They see any deviation as a threat. So you fall silent, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom, because you understand that not everything needs to be said, and that not everyone deserves to hear what you have to offer. Silence then becomes a refuge. It ceases to be submission and becomes conviction. Nietzsche said that maturity begins when we stop trying to convince others, when we understand that we have no obligation to be understood. It is at this point that the weight of the herd dissolves. You no longer need approval. Your truth does not depend on applause. This silence is different. It is not the silence of those who swallow everything to keep the peace. It is the silence of those who no longer need to prove anything. It is the silence of those who have found solidity within themselves. And this silence is uncomfortable because it reveals firmness. It exposes without words the insecurity of those who still need constant validation from others. You begin to realize how the bonds that seem deep were just tolerance in disguise. The friend who distances themselves for no reason. The family that starts treating you like a stranger. The comments that seem concerned but are overflowing with judgment. You've changed too much. You're getting too big for your boots. This is going to end badly. What these phrases hide is fear, not yours, theirs. Nietzsche saw resentment as the most dangerous poison in the herd. It doesn't attack with sincere criticism. It attacks with falsely generous advice, with poisoned compliments, with warnings that sound like caution. Resentment cannot tolerate those who break free, because every step you take toward freedom reveals the prison of those who remain. And no one likes to be confronted with their own cowardice. That is why your freedom bothers them, because it forces them to look at themselves, and looking inward hurts. So instead they point the finger, they try to discredit you, not because you are wrong, but because you had the courage to be what they did not dare to be. Opening your eyes to resentment is not a gesture of rebellion. It is an act of protection. It is not about revenge, but about clarity. When you begin to realize that certain advice hides emotional traps, that certain compliments are loaded with veiled criticism, something awakens in you. You begin to distinguish true affection from social theater, the sincere presence of disguised manipulation. Because resentment, deep down, is a form of control. Those who did not have the courage to be free try to keep others captive. And the best response you can give is to remain free, without justifying yourself, without explaining yourself, without waiting for permission. As you move away from the old rules, you realize that the maps that guided your life no longer work. There are no more clear signs, no ready-made paths. Everything seems dark, uncertain, and it is in this void that the greatest challenge arises. Creating your own ethics, forging values that are neither inheritance nor imitation, but the fruits of your own experience. Nietzsche called this transvaluation, the ability to invert inherited values and generate a new scale, more authentic, more aligned with who you have become. This stage is lonely and deeply uncomfortable. The old notion of right and wrong loses its power. The idea of success and failure dissolves, and what remains are questions. What makes sense to me? What brings me closer to my essence? What strengthens me? These questions are dangerous for those who have never learned to think for themselves. But they are liberating for those who have had the courage to tear up the old script. You begin to realize that certain mistakes were just legitimate attempts at living, that some failures were masters in disguise, that what was once called a flaw was actually your uniqueness trying to emerge. Outside the herd, values do not come ready-made. They are born from direct contact with life, from discomfort, from pain, from choice. And that is why they are unshakable. Those who build their own values do not bow to external pressure. They do not live to please or to fit in. They live to be true to themselves. This integrity comes at a cost, but it brings a silent strength. You are no longer led, you become the leader. And for the first time, life begins to feel like your own. At first glance, being free seems like a definitive victory. You feel light with the impression that the world has finally opened up before you. No strings attached, no masks, no more playing a role. But you soon realize that freedom comes with no guarantees. It offers no security, no maps. Being free means abandoning the tracks and walking on unknown ground, where every step is a choice and every choice is a risk. Freedom demands total responsibility. There are no more excuses, no more blame. You can no longer point the finger at the system, at your parents, at others. Now it's just you. And this discovery, as liberating as it may be, is also a burden. Because everything that happens from here on out, the successes and mistakes, the falls and conquests, is the result of your decisions. For many, this burden is unbearable. Nietzsche knew this. He wrote that few are strong enough to bear the burden of true freedom. It offers no applause, no belonging, no comfort. On the contrary, it destabilizes, isolates, and challenges. Instead of recognition, it brings doubt. Instead of acceptance, silence. That is why so many give up. That is why most prefer the golden cage of conformity to the open space of uncertainty. The field of freedom can also be an abyss, because it takes away our inherited references. Success, failure, morality, everything needs to be revisited, and revisiting hurts. It requires destruction in order to rebuild. It requires letting go of the image of the right person to make room for the real person. Imperfect, but authentic. And that is mourning. Mourning for the life you imagined you would live, for the approval that will not come, for the certainty that is falling apart. But it is in this abyss that existence gains weight. When everything depends on you, each step ceases to be automatic and becomes conscious. You no longer live by inertia, you live by choice. And choosing, even if difficult, is what makes us truly alive. Freedom is not a prize, it is a calling and a test. A continuous process of taking a stand in life, of accepting that there is no safe path, but rather your own path. Few will follow you. Many will think you are crazy. Others will judge, laugh, walk away. But in the silence of judgment and the solitude of choice, something is born that no crowd can offer, the feeling of belonging to yourself. And that feeling, once discovered, is never forgotten. Freedom requires you to be solely responsible for every choice, every mistake, every consequence. And that is scary. Suddenly there is no one else to blame. Not society, not your family, not your teachers. It's just you facing life, without crutches, without a manual. And when everything depends on you, the weight of existence can be overwhelming, because anything is possible, but anything can also go wrong. There is no safety net. There are no guarantees. And for many, this is unbearable. Nietzsche already warned us. Few can bear the burden of true freedom, because it brings no applause, offers no certainties, guarantees no belonging. It requires courage to carry on even without being understood, even without anything to lean on. It is like standing in an open field where every step can be a creation or a fall. Freedom is a constant risk, but it is also the only real chance to be who you are. It is in this space of uncertainty that you find your true strength. When you realize that every achievement is the result of your effort, that every pain is a consequence of the path you have chosen, and that every doubt is part of the process of becoming whole. To be free is to live without an audience, without seeking approval, without waiting for acceptance. It is to be with yourself, even if no one applauds. There comes a moment when you understand there are no masters, no maps, no fixed rules. Those who seem to have all the answers are just as lost as you are. And in that moment, everything changes. Because if no one knows the way, you are free to create your own. Nietzsche called this Übermensch, one who no longer needs the morality of the herd to exist, one who does not seek to be perfect, but rather consistent with their essence. It is this being who walks with steady steps, even in silence, who does not need to justify themselves, who understands that living with integrity is more valuable than living applauded. Their legacy is not made up of pretty words, but of the courage to have lived a true life. A life that, even if misunderstood, will serve as a beacon for those who are still searching for themselves. If this content touched you, made you think, feel, remember who you are, like this video, and subscribe to the channel. This helps this work to continue. And if you want to take it a step further, consider offering support of any amount. Your help strengthens this work and allows more content like this to reach more people. Because there are many still trying to cross the desert, and perhaps your contribution will be the light that reaches them.